Hello everybody, Grid21 back with a tutorial video. And this one is actually sort of in response to what I felt like was not a very well recorded video from cybrary.com, I believe it's called. And they were talking about virtual machines, and I just felt like that it wasn't well explained or set up very well. And the guy actually kind of ran out of memory while he was doing his virtual machine, which kind of just delayed the video and made it feel very long. So I'm just going to go ahead and just do my own version about how to create a virtual machine. I'll be using a VM player non-commercial use only version. I think this is a virtual machine version 7, I believe. I don't know the exact version. Let's see, this is actually version 6, but this applies to any virtual software, whether that be Oracle's VM box, which I don't personally like because I've actually ran into some bug issues with network drivers and some other stuff. So I prefer to use VM player, which is far easier to use and just, I think, a little bit more simplified and stuff. I have several ISO images. I'll be loading this Windows 10 64-bit. And a couple of notes before you make a VM. You should have more than 4 gigs of RAM on your system. If you have 4 gigs or less, do not attempt to make a VM. It will not load, it won't work right, you run into issues. I'm using my 16-core 24 gig RAM server because it has a lot more horsepower to run a machine top of a machine. If you have a quad core or less, also do not attempt to run a VM because you're going to be sharing your resources too much with your host machine, and your guest machine will not run very smoothly. So if you have those exact specs I mentioned, don't attempt this. If you have more, then by all means have fun with it. I would recommend at least 8 gigs or more for a VM, and at least a quad core or higher for a VM. That way you can properly run your virtual machine without an issue. So I'm going to go ahead and just create a VM. So we're going to do this very simply. So in VM player, go to player, new virtual machine. And we'll go ahead and select the ISO right off the bat. It's actually trying to read my disk image for some reason. It's getting a little finicky. But basically what you would do is I'm going to point it to this directory. And we're back. Sorry about that. VM player ran into an issue. So I'm going to go ahead and point it to my ISO images, which is actually, let me copy and paste this address to go right to it. We're going to use this Windows 10 64. We're going to open this. Could not detect which operating system this disk is. That's okay. Don't worry about it. We're going to tell it what it is later on. We're going to now go tell it's Microsoft Windows. We're going to use the Windows 8 x64 environment because Windows 10 and Windows 8.1 and Windows 8 are basically the same backbone and structure, so that will work just fine. I'm just going to leave it where it is as far as its directory. It's not going to bother navigating because that's just going to take too long. Okay, so I always like to give my VMs at least a 160 virtual hard drive. I don't like splitting it. I prefer it's one single file. That way it just doesn't break it up into multiple disks and stuff like that, or multiple files, and it just, I don't know. That's just what I've always done doing VMs. Now we're going to go to the configuration part. Okay, so we're going to assign this 4 gigs. I'm going to give it a 4 cores. These are some other virtualization things. Most of which I don't really touch or worry about. You can do more research on these yourself later if you're interested. Okay, so as far as network, I always do bridged because NAT causes problems. As I've done some research, it basically turns your computer into its own router and will assign its own set of IP address, like 192.1. Whatever. I prefer bridged because if you plan to port forward your virtual machine, which is absolutely possible, then give it a bridged one, and then we're going to tell it to use the network card on this server, so that way it has an actual IP address and you can have a lot more things you can do later with it. So we're just going to close that window and we're going to hit finish. We're going to go ahead and boot up our virtual machine. And this will just take a couple times to load it. If you've ever loaded a Windows OS, it's really straightforward. Just follow all the prompts, select the drive, hit next, let it do its thing, and then you'll be back and you have a full virtual machine. But I will actually go ahead and just make a time lapse and just speed through this for the sake of time and stuff. So we'll just let this sit, and you guys can watch the whole process in time lapse form. And also really quick, so obviously we're in the United States, you know, all this default stuff, you'll never have to touch this unless you live in a different country. Hit next, install now. License key, we're gonna actually skip because I don't have a license key. This is just for, so I'll be on a trial for Windows 10, but that's okay. Skip that. If you had a key, you would definitely enter it in to activate your virtual machine, although since virtual machines are basically temporary, you don't really need to enter in a product key. Except EULA, nobody actually reads this, so don't bother. Custom install, select the drive, new, next, whatever. And it does its thing, and I will go ahead and just speed through this, and you'll be able to watch the whole process of what to look for. So during my installation, you may notice that this tool popped up. This is a VM tools, basically allows the improvements of mouse and video performance and stuff. We will be installing this on the guest machine later on. It just makes interaction with the VM far easier. And obviously it suggests, you know, video and performance improvements and such like that. So if you see that, don't click install during installation, wait till this finishes. And then once it's done, it'll reboot, and then we'll go ahead and install this, and it will actually, this installation media will show up as if it were like a DVD being inserted into a DVD drive, and you'll install it. I'll walk you through the prompts, and I'll walk you through that process once we get to it. Okay, so our installation is done. Or the VM is just restarting, and it will basically boot up. The installation process didn't take that long. Your time will vary based on the hard drive, whether you're using a hard disk drive or a solid state drive. So the installation time will just vary. It's really kind of hard to time it. By comparison, I actually noticed I think Linux takes less time to install than Windows, but I mean, it's a VM, so you're not really pressed for time, so don't worry about it. So a random fun fact, for those of you who don't realize this, when Windows 10 first installs, it likes to download a lot of useless applications. So the way to shortcut that is you can actually disconnect this from the network. And this goes for actually even a physical machine as well. So by disconnecting the network adapter, excuse me, basically prevents Windows 10 from downloading all the useless applications. So I'm just going to actually temporarily disconnect this till the installation's done. And then once I get into the desktop, we will reconnect it to our bridged adapter. Okay, so Windows has done installing. It's asking for a product key. We're gonna skip this and do for some reason my mouse isn't showing up. I'm not sure exactly why that is. But we're gonna go ahead and just tab through all this. So we don't want this to do all this advertising junk because that's garbage. I really wish I could use my mouse. I don't know what happened here. Sometimes this can happen. Oh, well, whatever. Sometimes it can happen in VM. For whatever reason, sometimes the mouse doesn't always show up. And I don't know if that's just a issue with the software or an issue with the installation not showing. Because normally this would be installed on a computer that has, standard video driver and would normally be able to show your mouse and stuff. For some reason, my mouse is disappearing. And if that happens, just go through the tabs. Just hit your tab key and just cycle through everything until hopefully at some point your mouse should show up, probably on the desktop, or once you install the VM tools and stuff. So it goes to this whole hi, blah, blah, blah. And eventually we'll be getting to the desktop. I can show you how to install the VM tools. All right, we are in the desktop finally. That took more than necessary. And since we're back in, we can now connect it to a network. It will obtain it, and we just click yes. Okay, one sec. All right, so now we're going to do the install VM tools. So simply click install tools. It's going to show up on the, if it doesn't show up on the VM, you can navigate. Yeah, there he goes. So you can click this, and we're going to tell it to run. I'm going to click yes. Install the VMware player tools. And as I mentioned earlier, this will just makes it easier to interact with the VM, cuts down on the weird. As you can see, it's kind of like lagging, my mouse disappearing a little bit. So this will help reduce those issues that you're seeing. And it just makes the experience of the VM far better. One thing to note is that not every operating system will support the VM tools. Also, just make sure you click complete so you get everything. But not every VM or operating system will support the VM tools. There are certain instances of Linux that will not support it. There are also certain instances of other type of Linux-like or Windows-like OSs that may not support it. Windows definitely, but sometimes Linux not always. So if that happens, don't worry about it. You can still use a VM just fine without these tools. This is just sort of an optional thing that I personally install just to interact much better with everything. And installs things like audio driver, video driver. As you can see now, the improvements, there's visual improvements, obviously. And once it's done, it'll ask you to restart, and your VM is basically done. We'll go ahead and just restart as it asks, because it's acting like it's still a full machine, so restarts are still required anyway. And we'll go ahead and restart. And then we'll be back with our working computer. Okay, so we're back with our fully loaded VM. As you can see, there shouldn't be any, it's still kind of booting up, but as you can see, there aren't a whole lot of lag issues or anything like that. So you can just scroll through stuff pretty decently well. You may have also noticed that occasionally I was pulling my mouse off screen. There are two ways to release the mouse when you want to go back to your desktop. You can either hit Control-Alt, which is a VM player thing. Sometimes some programs will be like an Alt-Tab or a there's different keystrokes for different VMs, but for VM player specifically, it's Control-Alt together, and then you can release the mouse to work on your desktop, and then just simply click back on your VM to go back to using it and stuff. So that's basically it for establishing a VM. And just to verify the system settings I gave it, you can go and you can right click on Task Manager, hit Task Manager, go to Performance, and I prefer seeing the logical cores rather than one unit. And as you can see, this is a quad core with 4 gigs of RAM. And of course, the disk usage is probably downloading updates, I'm sure. And then it says the name of the network card. Now, oddly enough, it says Intel. I'm not sure why. This is actually a Realtek network card that's on the server physically. So I don't know what the reason for it saying that is, unless there's something else it might have installed. Probably something to do with the VM tools, but it doesn't really matter what it says as long as you see network activity. As you can see also too, if you look at the IP addresses, I was mentioning bridged connections versus NAT. Since it has a bridged connection, the IP sequence is in the same sequence as the one for the physical adapter. So this is .14, this is a .9. So it will actually, it knows that it's part of the same routing, I guess sort of same routing table as the rest of my internal network is. And being that it's also got that bridged adapter, that means it can also see other computers on my network as well, so you can actually interact, and it makes things like file sharing with your VM much easier. You can basically, whatever I put physically on my desktop here, I can then copy to my virtual desktop here, and they can talk to each other over the network. So it kind of unifies things by having a bridged adapter. So whenever you can, go for bridged, nothing else, and it just makes everything much more streamlined and easier. And that's basically that. So thank you for watching. If you have any questions, you can contact me on my YouTube page. I always read all of my comments and stuff like that. So yeah, this has been Grid21, and I will catch you guys later.